Good evening, everyone. Welcome members and officers to today's Scrutiny Panel 2 meeting, Wednesday, 11th of September 2024. This meeting is being held in hybrid form, with some members and officers joining the meeting online and others being present in the room. We currently have one member, Councillor Sidhu, joining us online. Not yet? Okay. This meeting is also live streamed on YouTube. Members and officers who are online should be on mute and raise the hand icon if they wish to speak. Okay. Item number 1, apologies for absence and substitutions. We have none. Thank you. No apologies received. No. If there's any missing members? Okay, I think we have everyone except Councillor Sidhu, who will be joining us online. Item 2, urgent matters. No. Item 3, matters to be considered in private. Any declaration? No. Okay. Item 4, no declaration. Has everyone received item 5, minutes of the last meeting? Any comments, any correction errors? Thank you. Okay, we go into item 6. It's focus on the regional park. We touched on this last meeting, last meeting, and we did talk about it quite comprehensively. But today we're going to talk about a bit more detail. We also want to schedule a visit to the regional park next Saturday around 10:15. If anyone is interested, I will be there with Chris Bunting to just look around and see it in real time. If you are interested, I will circulate the meeting point and the time. Yes, please. If we can circulate that, yeah, that will be. Yes, please. Microphone, Chris.
Can you hear me any better?
Yes.
Great. So the intention is to meet at the new park, Pear Tree Park in Perival, lots of peas, at 10:15. And I will take you on a guided walk around Pear Tree Park and one of the neighbouring areas called the Greenford to Gurnell Greenway, lots of G's, to give you a demonstration of the sort of biodiversity uplift and the transformation of the green open spaces in Perival. As an example of some of the work that the parks team do, but also they both sit within the regional park red line. That will take about an hour, and then from Perival, I would very much like you to join me in Norwood Green, near Glade Lane, Canalside Park, where there's a celebration, a conclusion of a piece of work we've been working with the Canal and Rivers Trust called the Southall Wellbeing Way, which is an upgrade of canal towpaths and some improvements to improve access to some of the green spaces as well. And there's an event that starts at 12, goes on for a few hours, but we should get there for about 11:45.
Yep. There's
some speeches to open, not to open, but to celebrate the event, which will take us to about 12:30. And then there's some activities. There's a guided tour around part of Glade Lane. There's some tree and shrub planting going on as well, so you can get as involved as you would like and depart at your leisure, really. So over the course of a couple of hours, you'll see Pear Tree Park, Glade Lane and the Southall Wellbeing Way as well. So I just thought, in terms of the time we have available, that would probably be a good cross section of that, because that also sits within the red line for the regional park as well.
Thank you. We'll circulate all the information and the meeting point by email if anyone interested to meet with us 10:15 Saturday 14th of September. Thank you, Chris. We move on to the presentation of the regional park. This will be presented by Chris Bunting, Assistant Director of Leisure. Chris, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Are you going to share it on the screen? So you would like me to join and share? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Bear with me then. This will take about 90 seconds, so if you want to talk amongst yourself.
No problem.
Feel free.
Chris will present the information, and then once he concludes it, we can take the questions afterwards. If you have any question, please hold off until the presentation is completed. Thank you.
It's just taking a bit longer than anticipated. Why?
It's because your laptop.
Go. Apologies for that technical issue. Thank you for the warm invite to present to you this evening. A focus on the regional park in relation to culture, health and wellbeing and the economy. And this evening, Kate Dean, who is the programme director for the regional park project, joins me this evening to help me give you an expression of the journey that we've been on in terms of the regional park, some of the the thinking. It's not moving. Why are you not moving? That's right. Yeah, so I focus on the regional park. Why are we doing this? The strategic perspective, the strategic context as well. Some of those reasons relate to climate action, a description of how we're getting there, and then some of the other factors that have played into the reasoning behind the creation of a regional park, the administrative commitment, manifesto commitment to create 10 new parks, looking at tree planting, biodiverse gardens, 20-minute neighbourhoods, and how that all fits and works around the concept of the regional park. A little bit around engagement and some of the groups and organisations that we've engaged, consulted with. And I've put there with a little help from our friends, because this is a really exciting and ambitious programme, and we can't do it all ourselves. So again, working with partners to collaborate to help us deliver on this amazing ambition. And this slide is a really exciting one for me, because when we started to talk about creating a regional park and understanding what the potential benefits were, it became evident really quickly that it would be provide part of the solution for a number of the challenges that sit in that strategic context as well. So from the council plan, the manifesto commitment to create 10 new parks, as I've said, plant trees, create 800,000 square metres of rewilded land in Ealing. Ealing's local plan as well, in terms of how the regional park would sit and support potential developments across the borough and improve access to green space for our residents. The climate and ecology emergency strategy was announced in 2019 as well, and again that talks about increasing our biodiversity in the borough. The health and wellbeing strategy that Public Health have delivered in collaboration with a number of multi-agencies and different parts of the council. My very own Ealing Biodiverse Action Plan as well, and the targets that are in there. The sport, the indoor and outdoor sports facility strategy too, and the cultural manifesto as well. So an opportunity with this imaginative, ambitious programme to satisfy or partly satisfy 6 to 7 different strategies that the council currently hold. And quite a detailed slide there, and it sort of builds upon what I've just relayed in terms of the number of strategies that this talks to as well. The council plan around greening and keeping Ealing clean, achieving net zero carbon by 2030, and ensuring our parks and open spaces and nature are protected and enhanced as well. The local plan, maintaining, enhancing, expanding, and I've put those in green font because there's an overlap between enhancing, expanding, protecting across a number of these strategies as well. Ensuring that green and blue spaces and other natural features are well planned, designed and managed in an integrated way to help fulfil their potential to be multifunctional in use and positively contribute to achieving multiple benefits. Facilitating the enhancement of existing green infrastructure, the creation of new green and open spaces, and making sure that we improve access to all of these spaces as well. So it's more than just creating these spaces, enhancing these spaces. It's actually making sure that they're more accessible than they've ever been. Maximising opportunities for urban greening and a net gain in biodiversity, which is incredibly important to satisfy the climate action plan. To support tree planting, the creation of woodlands, orchards, hedgerows, and to rewild to promote carbon capture and help promote greater biodiversity. All of these strategic contexts existed before the concept of the regional park, but you can see with this thinking that the regional park is going to be able to support and partly satisfy some of these. To promote community food growing, protecting our allotments and leading food partnerships, creating a new regional park as we're here tonight to talk about. The climate, ecology and emergency strategy talked about reshaping and modernising our approach to the management and maintenance of our green spaces to maximise carbon capture, enhance wildlife value, and to provide such important flood resilience as well. And you'll get an example of that when you visit both Pear Tree Park and Glade Lane in terms of how green spaces can help provide flood resilience as well, and ensure that these spaces are equipped to sustainably meet the needs and aspirations of our communities. Our population currently is 371,000. By 2031, it will be 391,000. So access to green space is reducing per capita year on year. So again, with the creation of the regional park, it's an opportunity to increase access to provide equity to green space. The health and wellbeing strategy talks about the building blocks of health and wellbeing, including the strength and resource of the community with which we identify. Health and wellbeing can be created and sustained through strong relationships, community connections, and access to community assets as well. So very much around the regional park being part of the building block to bring communities together, to connect them in order to make sure that we're trying to create long, healthy lived lives for our residents in Ealing. And we know that people who live in some parts of our borough will live 8 years less than other residents who live in other parts. So the difference is as stark as between Southall and Perivale, which are the two locations that we're going to on Saturday. If you live in Southall, you're more likely to die 8 years earlier than you would if you lived in Perivale. So again, thinking about all of that in terms of how we can help bring communities together, access to our assets and green spaces can only be a good thing. Why are we doing this? Again, the real focus on climate action, and again, the site visits will give you an insight into how we're thinking and how we're looking at our green spaces to make them more biodiverse and more rich in terms of ecology. The council's aim is to become carbon neutral as a borough and as an organisation in the next 6 years as well. A huge commitment, and as part of that, the council plans to create 10 new parks. We're part of the way through the delivery of that manifesto. We opened our second new park in as recently as July at Pear Tree Park to give 800,000 square metres back to wildlife through rewilding, pioneering 10 new community growing spaces for food growing as well. We have a cost of living crisis as well on top of all of the other societal needs as well. So enabling our residents, bringing people together to grow food again is another positive commitment. And to plant 50,000 trees to help us towards our ambitious programme to increase our canopy cover, our tree canopy cover from what is currently 17% to 25% by 2030. This is a document that was endorsed by the council two years ago. It provides an action plan across the borough in terms of our ambitions to make Ealing a special place for wildlife and biodiversity, conserving, enhancing habitats that create better and more interconnected places for wildlife across Ealing. And the key word there is interconnected, and that's part of the desire with the regional park, is to connect green spaces together. And also to increase awareness of biodiversity, encourage more people to connect and get involved with that as well. So again, that very much sits behind the premise of the creation of the regional park, is to use it as an asset to inform people, to educate people, and get people to understand the importance of tackling climate emergency. Why are we doing this? I suppose winding back, probably 12 to 15 months ago, when we were looking at how we were going to tackle the objective around creating new green spaces and improving access to green space, we started to talk in terms of greening the borough. Greening the borough became a phrase that was being used often in our meetings. But greening the borough didn't really mean much, and actually trying to create some tangibility around what greening the borough meant led us to start talking about being really ambitious. and looking at the lay of the land and how Ealing is formed in terms of its current green spaces as well. We have over 147 parks, and there are inequalities of access to green space depending on where you live in the borough. And whilst it's not necessarily possible to solve all of those to create equity across the whole borough, we felt that actually by looking at the way the green spaces work together, there was an opportunity to create a regional park, north to south, south to north, through the spine of Ealing, and actually starting to look at opportunities about how we can start to link in east and west, and also being ambitious in terms of looking beyond the borough boundaries, because residents don't necessarily recognise where Ealing ends and Harrow starts, or Ealing ends and Hounslow starts, for example. So again, looking at north to south and beyond, but not forgetting the east and west, and thinking about ways we can improve access to those spaces as well. And when we looked at a map, it became quite clear, and I guess out of the back of COVID, we started to recognise that people were valuing and using green spaces in a different way. You will recall your daily exercise that you were allowed to partake in as part of the lockdowns as well. And we saw people using, in particular, golf courses in a different way. Whilst golf courses were really popular during COVID because it was one of those activities that you could play and socially distance, actually we saw them used in other ways where people were doing their exercises, and yoga classes were springing up on the greens, for example. So, and there, in our belief, is a proliferation of golf courses in Ealing and around Ealing. There are over 30 golf courses or golf activities in quite a small radius in and around Ealing. We started to look at equity of golf as an inequality compared to people's access to green space, and some of the statistics are on this slide. The average hectare per thousand population per person is per thousand population is 1.97. In Ealing Broadway, for example, that drops down to 0.15 of a hectare per thousand people. And in North Greenford, it peaks at 6.58. So between 0.15 and 6.58, you can see a massive discrepancy in terms of equality. Hierarchically, the GLA, Greater London Authority, and Nicole Kaloum is speaking after me, will start to sort of talk about the importance of green spaces and the creation and the opportunity to create green space. But their hierarchy recognises that a green space at over 400 hectares can be categorised as a regional park. With the inclusion of the green spaces that exist within the current red line of our ambition for a regional park, there's 186 hectares that are devoted to golf. If you combine our green spaces with the golf courses, it takes us up to nearly 600 hectares, so well in excess of the 400 hectares. And there's some data there in terms of golf activities. About 1.5% of adults in England play golf on a regular basis. So that slide sort of talks to the fact that we felt there was a real inequality in terms of people accessing golf courses and people who we could improve their access to green space. We started to tease out some key themes. These weren't set, these were workshops by officers, and these have been tested through engagement and consultation sessions with a huge range of residents and community organisations, some of the multi-agencies that have an interest in these areas, Environment Agency, for example. We started to see the overlap, and we started to recognise that there were three key themes here: health and wellbeing, sustainability, and the economy. And within each area, we've just put down some tasters and some of the overlaps. So health and wellbeing, creating greater opportunities for leisure, culture, play, heritage, sport. Sustainability, improving the green infrastructure, biodiversity, woodland and forestry creation, creating sustainable drainage solutions and improving accessibility. And they overlap in terms of nature, food production, and active travel. And then within economy, we're looking at potential for employment and skills, green jobs, improving tourism, putting Ealing on the map in terms of a destination, and boosting the local business economy. And again, there's overlaps with health and wellbeing in terms of culture, placemaking, providing community facilities, food and beverage outlets as well. But all of these overlapped in terms of connecting our communities, equality, diversity, and inclusion as well. So those were the three themes that have been threaded through all of the work that's happened since the concept was brought forward. So the key objectives as we've seen it is to address the inequality of access to green spaces, as I've said a number of times. The park actually adjoins 5 of the 7 towns. There's a concept of green fingers, and there's an image within this slide deck which will bring that to life, and hoping to extend into other towns to make it more accessible for all of our residents, all of our 400,000 residents over time. To enhance that natural resilience, including flood resilience as referenced, to create new areas in which to restore and create new habitats for wildlife, to improve the health and well-being for our residents, to improve their healthy lived lives, to create more opportunity for community-led projects, and also to create new jobs. And those are the 3 themes that, and this is some of the artwork that we've used in terms of the engagement and consultation with groups and residents. Just going to pause there. Just hand over to Kate, who's been part of the commissioning of Pryor and Partners, who have pulled together using those themes to provide some design principles. So, do you want to pick up from there?
Thank you. So what you've got on the slide are these 4 principles. The first 2 are really important in terms of sort of connecting all of the communities, as Chris has talked about. But there's also a really important one about overcoming sort of barriers, and that sort of physical barriers as well. The proposed boundary of the park runs through the centre of the borough, and we're really keen to make sure that that doesn't form a natural barrier, but it's an opportunity for all residents to access from all parts of the borough. We've talked about natural resilience, so I won't dwell on that one, but the last one is just about bringing the park to life, and that's really important in terms of meanwhile activation. This is a long-term project, so we want to make sure that things happen and things are happening in places like Pear Tree Park, and just making sure that within the regional park itself, we've got some focus areas. It's quite a long area through the borough, and as we take you through the slides, you'll see that Priors, who have been our consultants on this project, have identified a series of key focal areas.
Thank you, Kate. As Kate said, this is a linear park, and this sort of sets out the landscape, the topography of the regional park. Priors have identified that there's an opportunity as an early intervention is to actually create a regional trail through the park from north to south, south to north as well. And there are a number of interventions that would be required in order to make that fully accessible from top to bottom. But we're looking at that as a potential first step in terms of starting to form the regional park. That includes improvements to the existing public realm, potentially 2 new bridges, improved signings and crossings and interpretation, and potentially a long-term ambition for the creation of a green bridge over the A40 as well. But again, for me, this is probably one of those exciting slides that, again, working with Priors, they've identified that there's a real opportunity here, as I said, to take us east and west, but actually very well, as I said, creating a regional park or a new park, but actually improving the way it's perceived and how people can access it is really important. So the last thing we want to do is to encourage people from everywhere to drive to this. By greening and enhancing the access to the existing green spaces, we think there's a real opportunity here to raise awareness and really put the regional park on a map. So this plots out the stations, the district centres, community facilities, the schools, the other nearby parks, some of the council-owned housing estates, and new major development sites as well. And the dotted green lines are those opportunities that are outside of the regional park, but actually start to think about how we can attract people into the regional park. So for me, the green finger concept is really, really interesting and exciting. What does a green finger look like? Well, it may be something that is a tree-lined avenue. It may be something that promotes active travel, but just really makes it, in a simple term, more easy to access green space from where you live. Do you want to pick up this one? Put the glasses back on.
Sadly, I can't finish without them. So in terms of these initial design ideas, Prior's identified some key focal points, starting at the top, and working sort of like down through Borough. So we've got Horsenden at the top, and then it comes down through Perryvale, then into Churchfields and Warren Farm at the bottom. The river forms a really key part of the design, and thinking about how we can use that to connect the different elements better, but also it provides great sort of opportunities to enhance ecology and also improve the quality of the river that we know in parts is sort of quite challenged. In terms of what could go in the focal areas, as we've got on this slide, they've really thought about ecology, the opportunity for sports and play. We want this to be sort of community-led as much as we can. So again, they've sort of identified locations where we could focus on those, and then also sort of potentially cultural opportunities. So in last year's residents survey that we did online, we asked about residents' interest in some sort of outdoor cultural facility, and there was a really positive response to that. So there's potential to put something with a sort of strong cultural focus potentially into Churchfields.
As part of the work with Prior's, they started to drill down into a number of those focus areas, and review Perryvale Park, Pear Tree, and Gurnell as one of those. And there's quite a lot of detail in there. It's building upon what's there. So you'll see Pear Tree Park for the first time at the weekend if you've not already been there. We're looking at new playground provision. There's a cafe that's there already, so playground juxtaposed to the cafe. Improved sporting facilities, new all-weather pitches, improving the sports facilities that are already there. The site there, as you can see, is dominated by a sustainable drainage solution in the south, so actually helping to restore the river and its natural flow, recreating the horseshoe that's there, tree planting, hedgerow planting, and actually trying to return it back to nature. And that all sits on what was previously Perryvale Park Golf Course. So the golf course closed in June, Pear Tree Park opened in July. But this is our ambition for the longer term in terms of what Pear Tree Park and its relationship with Perryvale Park looks like as well. And to the east, you'll see that there's the Gurnell development as well, so sort of creating opportunities to embed Gurnell into the landscape and actually create ways to cross the river to get into Pear Tree Park and beyond. So again, quite an exciting, ambitious plan for that site as well. And there's an image of the ribbon cutting on the 17th of July. You want to go with this one?
Yes, so this is just the last slide in terms of a summary of the programme. It's expected to be a long-term programme. Prior's have developed a series of potential interventions that could be delivered in 5-yearly intervals. so that there are things that can be done straight away, but there are certainly sort of longer term interventions. So this bit that we've talked about this evening is very much the first phase. It started with the Cabinet decision last September. We procured a team of consultants in December and January, and they've worked for most of this year developing up the concept plan for the park. That work's now concluded, and we I think intend to sort of look at doing some more public engagement on that plan shortly.
So that's the regional part. I've provided a few additional slides in terms of the new parks commitment as well. So as I say, we were looking at creating 10 new parks. There's 9 listed there. Acton Gardens, which opened last October. Glade Lane, you're going to visit at the weekend. Pear Tree Park opened last month. Green Quarter, Central Plaza, as part of the park development in Southall, is due to be extended and open next year. Twyford Abbey Gardens, again, working with the developer's timeline, we expect to open that new green space, that return of space to the public, hopefully in 2025. Warren Farm Local Nature Reserve, 2025. Blacklands, which is a site in Greenford near Berkeley Fields, later this year, using S106 from a nearby development. Reimagining South Ealing Park Cemetery, and Greenford Quay as well. There's a site in Greenford Quay where there's an opportunity to create a new sports park, and we're still working on opportunities to meet the ambition of 10. And some of the images there in terms of some of those. Been a while since I did this presentation. So top right is the Green Quarter. Underneath that is Warren Farm. South Acton Park is top middle. Pear Tree Park is bottom left. Blacklands is top left, and having a blank on the one bit. Oh, that's Twyford Abbey, of course. So this is an example of 6 new green spaces in the borough. Again, there's wasn't too long ago that we undertook quite a major scrutiny review program around regrowing, rewilding and recycling. And there's a whole range of information there that sort of talks to the regional park and recycling, regrowing, rewilding credentials as well. And I just listed some of the organisations that we have worked with, continue to work with, and have engaged in terms of the regional park. But most importantly is recognising all of those groups already help make Ealing a better place in terms of its green spaces, keeping it clean, supporting wildlife, and connecting our communities together. I will stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you both. That was quite exciting and interesting. We're going to take questions now. Anyone has? Let me just correct there. I'm just going to go to the next presentation. We have 2 presentations. We'll do the other presentation. Please hold your questions, and then we'll do the questions last. Next presentation is from Nicole. Welcome, Nicole, Senior Policy and Programme Officer, Green Infrastructure, Greater London Authority. Welcome, Nicole.
Hello everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at your meeting tonight. Really exciting to hear Chris's presentation as well, and yeah, I've learned a lot about the project, and I think I'll have to rethink what I'm going to show you, because I think maybe I'm going to be talking to the converted, but I was asked to present on sort of the park in relation to sort of governance, management, funding. I've also sort of stepped back and looked a little bit about strategy as well, but I just thought it'd be useful from a London-wide GLA perspective just to sort of take that step back. So I'm just going to share my screen, and fingers crossed this all works.
Yes, we can see it.
Just trying to get the slideshow to come on. Excellent. Hopefully that's full screen for you now, is it? It
is, yes. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. All right, I shall canter through. I think I've got too many slides. So, there we go. So this is what I'm going to aim to cover in this short presentation. There's quite a lot, so I will probably canter through some of it. I think you're all familiar with anyway. So I won't go through that. So starting with, I wanted to sort of start by stepping back and taking this sort of broader view of strategic priorities across London. So thinking how the regional park might fit into those. And I just wanted to set out some sort of, I guess some of this has come up in the previous presentation, but this is the National Green Infrastructure Framework Principles. So Natural England have this year produced this green infrastructure framework with quite a lot of kind of useful guidance, mapping, and sort of process journeys, as they call them, for developing green infrastructure strategies and standards and plans. So I just wanted to flag that, which I'm sure most of you are aware of. But the point I wanted to make here is how you know, the role of parks and green spaces in cities has really sort of changed from its traditional role as just being a place for recreation to sort of really meeting a lot wider kind of uses and functions in the face of climate change and the ecological emergency, and also in recognition of the importance of parks and green spaces to thriving and prosperous communities. Public space is a place that brings communities together, but also can really impact on the economy. And I think you picked up on that in your presentation, Chris, very well. So in terms of the mayor's, this is the Mayor of London's priorities, which I think are useful to know in that they really direct mayoral funding, and we're at the beginning of a new, well, first year of a new 4-year term of the Mayor of London. So the Mayor really has 4 broad priorities for green infrastructure. And the first one is around fair and equal access to nature and green space. So we know in the same way that Chris mentioned about Ealing, London's very green, but not everyone has good access to green space. So providing fair and equal access isn't just about filling those gaps in those areas of deficiency in access with new green space, but also providing better links, and then focusing on the way that green spaces are designed to be welcoming to all and meet the needs of everybody. And I've just shown this publication that the GLA produced recently on safety in public space for women, girls and gender diverse people, just as an example of kind of focusing particularly on sort of perhaps more vulnerable people's use of green space. And there's lots of good tips in that guide for how to design places, how to think about the design and management of places as well, to make sure that it feels welcoming to all. The second of the mayoral priorities is, unsurprisingly, around helping places to adapt to climate change. As we know, green space, green infrastructure has a really important role in providing nature-based solutions to climate change. And the London Climate Resilience Review, which was published fairly recently this year, provides an assessment of London's climate resilience and needs around that, and makes 50 recommendations for action to guide London's preparations for climate change, including things like taking a strategic approach to planning and designing green infrastructure. And then there's a whole host of guidance out there on how to do that through green spaces. So this one here, the Reimagining Rainwater in Parks and Green Spaces, is a GLA guide available to download on our website. It's lots of guidance on that and how that can be incorporated into green spaces. So a third mayoral priority is around making space for nature and supporting nature recovery. So that's about understanding what needs to be protected. So first of all, what have you already got in an area to protect? And then how can, following the Lawton principles of sort of bigger areas for nature, better areas in terms of habitats and quality, and more joined up places for nature, how can that be addressed through the design of green spaces and green infrastructure networks? And the London Rewilding Task Force reported, I think it was last year, and those recommendations are being taken forward and can be translated into any projects at any scale. So you can see there the three key recommendations are around large-scale rewilding projects, supporting smaller stepping stone sites between those large-scale sites and smaller scale activities across London, and then really promoting opportunities for Londoners to get involved in rewilding the city. And then the fourth sort of key priority is around water, really, and particularly clean and healthy rivers. And the Mayor made a commitment in his manifesto in the last elections to make rivers swimmable by 2030, which is going to be quite a tall order because the Mayor really lacks the powers to really deliver this on his own or on our own. So convening stakeholders, working with boroughs and others to really try and crack the problems of river pollution, water pollution is going to be really key to the delivery of this plan. So this river health map, which is shown here, is available online on the London Data Store, and it's sort of created to pool information collected by various organisations that show how healthy local rivers are. And the GLA with others, with partners, is also developing the first London surface water strategy at the moment, and this is the interim reports also available on the website, and has lots of strategies and actions for accelerating nature-based sort of flood management measures and water quality improvements. So now I wanted to move on to considering how these priorities can be delivered through planning and strategy actions. And again, by way of context, these are the sort of key London-wide strategies to sort of link into. So the London Environment Strategy, which sets targets for green infrastructure, so 50% of London to be green. So green cover we're talking about here, and by 2050, and that tree canopy cover is increased by 10% by 2050, which would take it up to about just over 23% canopy cover across London. And it's great to see that Ealing has a target of 25%. That's really fantastic to see that ambition. Also, the Mayor's transport strategy covers things like green and healthy streets and encouraging active travel along green routes and cycling and walking routes. And of course, the London Plan has a whole host of green infrastructure policies. First one sort of highlighted here sort of shows how there's an expectation to sort of plan London's network of green and open spaces as a network and manage them as a network for their multiple benefits, and that boroughs should prepare green infrastructure strategies, including identifying opportunities for cross-borough collaboration and so on. I just wanted to highlight the importance of data and how the GLA's London Data Store has a wealth of useful data for planning projects at borough level or at a regional park level even. And just flagging to here, the green infrastructure focus map is the sort of grey one on the left-hand side, and that sets out sort of basically providing evidence on where green infrastructure improvements, investments might be best targeted for different outcomes, and what kinds of interventions might be most beneficial depending on the needs of any given area. So it's divided, it's quite sort of small there, but the whole of London is divided into sort of 300-metre wide hexes, so you can really drill down into a lot of detail there and look at 12 variables, including water quality, surface water flood risk, sort of air quality, access to open space, and then things like social and economic factors like health deprivation, and so on. So that can really be used as a tool to prioritise interventions. And then the climate risk map focuses on the vulnerability of populations to climate change, really focusing on flooding and overheating. And again, you can zoom in on areas and look at what areas are prevalent, what issues are prevalent in the area you're focusing on, and which communities are particularly vulnerable to help prioritise action and investment. So we're using all this data to create a London Green Infrastructure Framework, which is very current, and the aim is to produce this so it'd be complete by summer 2025. So I think the development of the Ealing Regional Park is really timely in terms of feeding into this framework, and there'll be opportunities in October when we hold stakeholder workshops to do just that. So the Green Infrastructure Framework is an update to the old All London Green Grid, which was integrated into the London Plan in 2020 as supplementary planning guidance, and now a lot of it's been delivered, some of it's out of date, and we also have new mapping and data to inform decision making. So it's going to look very different to the old All London Green Grid. It's going to be a lot more data led. And we're going to create a framework to guide mayoral investment, but also a public-facing web map like the Green Infrastructure Focus Map, but hopefully a bit more user-friendly, because there were some, perhaps not quite so good sort of issues with that map that boroughs, green space landowners, managers and others can sort of use to help plan, fund, design and deliver green infrastructure across London. And part of that Green Infrastructure Framework will be the statutory local nature recovery strategy that the Mayor is responsible for delivering across London. So this will effectively provide the nature layer of the Green Infrastructure Framework. So it's going to comprise a local habitat map and a statement of biodiversity priorities. There's been lots of stakeholder workshops being run over the summer to feed into this, and this is a screenshot of an interactive map which you can input into. So I'd encourage you to go online and add in Ealing's opportunity areas for nature recovery and get those onto the map. The LNRS, Local Nature Recovery Strategy for London, will only be as good as the information and data that gets put into it. So we're really urging key stakeholders like yourselves to do that now, and make sure we include those priorities, those priority habitats and opportunity areas, and obviously the regional park will be key to feeding into that. Then we also convene with the Forestry Commission, the London Urban Forest Partnership, and the delivery of the London Urban Forest Plan. And this is with about 25 partners across London, working in trees and woodland. It's not a spatial strategy, so there's not an actual spatial plan, but it aims to coordinate activities of the sector across 12 goals and has a sort of shared action plan, which is actually currently being refreshed. So this is a sort of key strategy for the sort of trees and woodland sector. So how does it all fit together? There's a lot of strategies and frameworks there. At the London level, you can see at the top, the London Plan, the Mayor's Transport Strategy and the London Environment Strategy. So the Green Infrastructure Framework will feed into those and also inform the more detailed plans sort of below on this chart. So the Local Nature Recovery Strategy, being part of the Green Infrastructure Framework, is there as the nature layer, and the London Urban Forest Plan will sit under that as the sort of trees and woodland element, and those will help inform the local level, the borough level plans, strategies, some examples given there, and then the sort of more operational plans in terms of sort of parks, biodiversity action plans, and a local tree and woodland or urban forest plans. So moving on swiftly to looking at how the aspirations of all these strategies and plans can be delivered on the ground. So unlike sort of hard infrastructure, green infrastructure tends to increase in value over time rather than depreciate. So it's an asset, not a liability, I would say, although it's not always seen in that way. So hence the focus of this section on value and investment as opposed to funding. And I wanted to start just by flagging the importance of natural capital accounts, which can really help inform and improve decision making by framing public green spaces as economic assets, and it really highlights the sort of value of the benefits that they provide. In 2017, there was a London natural capital account produced, which sort of started to reveal the hidden value of London's green spaces and also cut that by borough. So there's a little section on Ealing here. Not all values of green spaces could be quantified, so this is very much an underestimate of the value, and of course now it's getting a bit out of date, and I expect there's lots of new data that could provide an updated account for London, which we are considering doing. So also I just wanted to flag the fairly obvious point that a natural capital account could be used for the regional park project as a sort of before and after kind of valuation. So you can use natural capital accounting to estimate a baseline value of the green spaces of the site as it is currently, and then take the proposals and estimate the value after improvements are carried out to show the uplift that the investment could provide, which could be really useful for sort of demonstrating to funders the value of investing in this site. And parks and green spaces are a very smart investment, as shown in this infographic from the Parks Alliance. This is in one of their documents that just actually might be a bit small. I'm not sure whether you can see that, but you can go to the document and have a look. There's a natural capital value for parks in England there, but also just highlighting all the different benefits that can be quantified. So there's many potential sources of funding, sort of broadly listed here, but I'd say the key to securing sufficient funding is really to secure political commitment to prioritising investment from core budgets for all the cross-cutting benefits for health, well-being, economic success, and so on. Green spaces, you know, are typically siloed, and if they can get out of their silo and be shown to add the value across public services, I think it opens up potential sort of different public funds. So I think the key is to develop a business case and a funding plan which incorporates a range of sources, and critically ensure that capital is only invested in projects when the ongoing revenue is secured for aftercare, or there's a good plan for securing that in the long term. I think there are new opportunities now with new biodiversity net gain requirements in planning. So in addition to planning gain through SIL and Section 106, there's potential now for habitat banks to provide new sources of income for long-term maintenance. And there are examples of local authorities that have done this, such as in Plymouth. And also the GLA are working with Finance Earth to explore how green finance can be accelerated, including in for nature-based solutions and climate adaptation. So we're looking at sort of identifying ways that private finance could be accelerated and what business models we need to consider to achieve that, the level of appetite amongst investors, and the scale of finance that could be potentially unlocked across London. So the markets that are being considered for that are the biodiversity net gain market, voluntary biodiversity credits, woodland carbon code, and natural flood management funding. So there will be more on that to come, which hopefully will be useful for projects like this. So sustaining the value and functions of green space really depends on good management, and for that you need the right skills employed. So it's really important to use good management standards and make sure that the bar is set high enough to ensure that that value is maintained. So just flagging some sort of standards here. So the Green Flag Award standards, not every park will have a Green Flag Award, but the sort of 8 criteria of the Green Flag Award standard are really useful for setting management plans, and also a requirement of funders such as the National Lottery Heritage Fund that sites use the Green Flag Award as the sort of structure for their management plan, that they achieve that standard as well. And then Parks for London have a really good green space quality manual, which is an aid for sort of setting, maintaining and improving quality standards across all types of green infrastructure, not just parks. So it's a sort of easy to use sort of reference guide for quality standards of landscape elements. And their Good Parks for London guide annual report promotes good practice, helps sort of raise quality standards by sort of assessing how borough park services perform against 10 criteria, and sort of showcases good examples. And also Parks for London really encourage taking an asset management approach to green space management, so a sort of systematic cradle to grave approach to governance and managing physical and intangible assets. So that would be another recommendation. And then just thinking about managing for people and nature, that's a balance. So as well as making places feel safe and welcoming for people, even wild spaces need the signs of care to encourage use by people, such as cutting the edges of paths and signs explaining why areas are left for wildlife. And some areas may be more important for wildlife than people, and you just need to keep people out. So it's about achieving a balance. Then obviously managing for a changing climate and choosing climate resilient species, and looking after soils, providing cool space and so on. And you need the right skills for the job. Green infrastructure skills are typically undervalued, and green infrastructure management is under-resourced. This has a huge impact on the quality of places. So resource planning from the outset should be a priority. And I think planning for a new regional park really provides opportunities to develop a training programme for new recruits. So offering things like green space apprenticeships, and working with organisations to provide trainee placements like London Wildlife Trust Keeping It Wild programme could be a real opportunity here to develop skills to support the quality over time. Finally, you'll be pleased to know, I just wanted to touch on governance considerations. So bringing all the previous sort of topics together, good governance is really key to the success of green spaces. You'll need to consider how best to provide oversight and governance of this really ambitious project. I don't think business as usual in terms of green space management will be enough to meet the scale of the ambition. So just learning from the research that's been done recently on this or over the last few years, I think many places have sort of started to consider alternative models to traditional local authority funding, but there's no one size fits all approach. And there's been a shift from a shift towards, should I say, sort of sharing decision making and involvement of sort of wider range of stakeholders, and in some cases a complete transfer to community or third sector control. But current views on where the powers and responsibilities for public space governance should lie are very much divided. So some research raises concerns about fragmentation of ownership and management, and the privatisation of public space, the loss of kind of economies of scale across boroughs when trusts are set up for individual sites. But others sort of highlight the diversification as a sort of positive or even a necessary move to ensure the future of public green space is safeguarded from public sector resource cuts, for example. So findings from the Future Parks Accelerator project, and you can look at them yourselves if you haven't already, they show that the political and public preference is for public green spaces to continue to be owned and managed by local authorities. But there have been successes like in Bournemouth, where a charitable parks foundation has been set up. And then other surveys like the Parks for London one done for the London Green Spaces Commission, shown here, has shown that partnering or delegating responsibility to community groups doesn't always lead to cost savings, because to do it effectively, you need to really provide a lot of support and management, and to sort of build the capacity of community groups to sort of do this effectively. And again, concerns over loss of democratic accountability have been identified when public spaces are controlled by non-public bodies. So basically some form of partnership approach is likely to be beneficial in a large site like this. Partners can bring different knowledge and strengths and can help lever in additional funding. But working in partnership takes time to develop trust. It can be quite challenging, and good processes can be time consuming. So I would just end on the point that the key is to start thinking about this all now. So don't leave thinking about the management to the end. So as plans are being developed for sort of capital, if you like, changes that are needed to create the regional park, think about placekeeping as well as placemaking. Because capital investments can soon decline if they're not properly managed over time. And Sheffield University's done a lot of work around placekeeping and have this placekeeping group. This is a screenshot from a website where there's lots of interesting resources to learn from. So I think that is it. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. That's my email address. I work with my colleague Jude Hassel in a job share, hence my strange email address. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Nicole. That was quite comprehensive and interesting to read about the excitement events happening across the country. Now I open the room for questions.
Thank you. Both really interesting presentations. I had a couple of questions about the regional park, and then just a bit more broadly. Chris, you mentioned at the beginning about sort of green space per capita in the borough is going down, and obviously the population, I think it's going about 20,000 over the next 10 years. So does the regional park increase the green space per capita in the borough once the sort of the project is complete? I understand obviously it's a long-term project. In terms of access, I know one of the slides showed that obviously I think the ward with the lowest was Ealing Broadway. North Greenford was the ward with the most green space in the borough. Obviously, North Greenford sort of abuts where the regional park's going to be, and a large bulk of it. I guess Ealing Broadway obviously geographically is further away from it. I guess what is I know you spoke about sort of physical connections. I just wonder about what the other barriers are to accessing other than sort of transport, because if you look at North Greenford, for example, it's a much more deprived area of the borough than Ealing Broadway. I was just looking at some figures on the council website from 2022 compared to Ealing Broadway, but it's got the largest amount of green space. So geographically, it's not the fact that people have to travel very far to access it, but have we done any piece of work looking at what other barriers there are to accessing green space? I had a few more questions, but I don't want to take too much time. So I'll just another one that's separate, then I might come back later for another bite of the cherry. But I know Nicole mentioned about trainee places for sort of green jobs. Are we doing any of that in Ealing? Are we sort of apprenticeships or in this sort of field?
Thank you. Councillor Hirsch? Yeah, no, we'll take three. I've got 3 questions. That's fine. We'll do both of you, and then we'll do the next lot. Thank you.
No, I'm happy to. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Nicola. A very, very interesting, obviously a very ambitious plan. My questions are probably about timing a lot. So within the presentation, we are talking about a 10-year plan. Okay, and phase 1 is finished, which was July, but there's nothing about where's phase 2 or 3. Then there was something talking about a 5-year interval. So I didn't understand that. So do we have a 10-year plan, and what are the next steps actually? There was also talk about a private consultation. So I'm not clear what's next and when is next, etc. Connected with that a little bit, there are obviously your lovely initial ideas or initial plans. Is there an idea when we have more final plans? Or how close are the initials to a final? So, just to get a bit of an idea about timings, when is what, that kind of thing. And the second question is all about funding. I think Nicola touched a bit on that. Funding and partners and all of this is very connected. Do you have a plan already for funding, especially if we think about 10-year plus plan, that goes way beyond what we normally plan. So how does that look like at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Chris.
series of questions which plays into the sort of programme direction, timing and next steps and the phasing and finance. Councillor Conti, I suppose the layout of Ealing exists, the green space exists, we've mapped that. Some of the green spaces within the red line of the regional park are currently not publicly accessible. And that's what you will recall the scrutiny overview in terms of the golf provision and the decision to close Pear Tree Park, and an understanding that people were less likely to access golf courses because there's an activity going on there. So as part of the calculation in terms of understanding equality around access to green space, we very much looked at those over proliferation of golf courses and believe that actually closing Paraval Park golf course and converting that into a park is going to reduce the barriers for access to green space, and it's building and exploring that more broadly across the borough, the regional park. I think I was at a Brent River Park event last night. They were talking about what if, and trying to think about being more bolder, more broader, more ambitious beyond the red line of the regional park, and thinking about how we can connect to Walpole, Lammas, Gunnersbury, Eva. We've been speaking to Barnet, Brent, Hillingdon and Hounslow. Got a meeting with the National Trust next week to talk to them about Osterley as well. So again, looking at how we can expand the access to green space beyond the council's boundaries as well, to increase the accessibility of Ealing residents into green spaces that are beyond the borough boundaries as well. So as I say, trying to take this generational opportunity to improve access to green spaces, respect, protect and enhance wildlife really. So barriers to green space, we have a really good understanding of why people will use parks and green spaces and the benefits they can get from those. There's a piece of work the council's doing around creating 20-minute neighbourhoods as well. Within that, we're looking at 10 minutes to a green space and 10 minutes back to their front door as well. And actually, we talk about hyper localisation, and we've used that as a principle in some of our parks work in terms of trying to create green spaces and activities within green spaces on people's doorsteps within that 10-minute catchment area as well. Through the work that I've been doing with Let's Go Southall, for example, we recognise there's all sorts of barriers, health, time, prior commitments, and even an understanding about where green space is in relation to where they live, in terms of aspirations and having time to get out and explore. Probably doesn't exist equally across the whole of Ealing as well. So there's an exercise for us to do in terms of promoting the benefits of green space, and we hope using the regional park as an opportunity to do that. We talked about green jobs, and again, I think there's a huge amount for us to do. I think we're probably mid-pack in terms of where we are. We have apprentices that a cohort of apprentices that work for Greener Ealing at the moment, but working with regeneration, economy and skills, we're looking at more opportunities to do more and more. Capel Manor are based in Gunnersbury Park, as you'll be familiar with as well. I'm working with them. But where we've done a huge amount of work is supporting voluntary organisations and charities to help us protect and enhance our green spaces. We've done some community asset transfers where we've actually given, this plays into Nicole's point around governance and management, around giving green spaces to groups to manage themselves. So there's a sort of a mix of things that we're working on ahead of the regional park. Don't know if you want to talk about timing first in terms of the phasing, and it's not necessarily phasing, but there's periods of time. phase one wasn't the delivery of Pear Tree Park. It's more broader than that. That was just an exercise within to start creating the building blocks for the regional park as opposed to a distinct phase.
Thanks, Chris. I suppose it's just worth emphasising the sort of complexity and scale of the project. It's huge. We've moved the project along at quite a pace from when the consultant team were appointed in December and January, and the focus has been on them producing a concept plan for us. So it is conceptual, it's high level, it's given us lots of ideas. I think what we'd like to do now is go out and sort of test those ideas with residents and community groups and stakeholders before we start to kind of drill down into specific deliverables. We do talk about the project being potentially over sort of 10 years. What Priors did for us was give us a series of interventions that could be delivered in 5 yearly intervals. So there are 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 plus, and lots of that is sort of influenced by funding and sort of availability of land. As Chris said, not all of it is readily accessible at the moment. So just to lead on into that sort of discussion about funding and a business case, that is one of the next active work streams. Nicole talked about some of the ways and means of funding it that we've started to look at. We also did some research ourselves in terms of potential governance models. So there is a lot to do. We feel as if we've done quite a lot, but certainly in terms of developing that business case, that is one of the next active work streams for the project.
Okay, thank you. Next set of questions. Yeah, Councillor, go, Giselle.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you very much for the presentation to all of you. I know it's a really large park, but how do you propose to fill that park with residents, and what type of activities will you provide?
Workshop. We haven't necessarily bottomed that out yet. I mean, it's full of potential. We've talked about health and well-being, sustainability, economy, skills. Sport plays a really large part in that. Gurnell sits in the regional park. The Pear Tree Park and looking at increasing the biodiversity as part of the destinations that Kate referenced, from Horsenden Hill down through Warren Farm, looking at making sure they've got accessible toilets, a cafe offer, and some car parking. So we have 4 focal points within the regional park that define that, creating nature trails and paths through that as well. A lot of these green spaces already exist and they're already animated as well. So a number of our community sports clubs actually sit within the regional park as well. There are golf courses, there's Gruffalo trails, there's the river, there's canoeing, kayaking. We're hoping to bring in a cultural amphitheatre in one of the locations. We're exploring outdoor swimming within one of the sites as well. So a whole host of things too. I referenced education, looking at the potential for 1 or 2 of the existing parks buildings to be used as education centres to encourage people to want to find out more about the climate emergency as well. Working with our community organisations, volunteers, to give some of those a home so they can base their activities from there as well. So Ealing Wildlife Trust, Costons, Lager Can, Ealing Parks Foundation, supporting the friends of our parks as well. So We've talked about glamping, we've talked about camping, we've talked about everything really that a green space would welcome. Concerts, community events, etc. So yeah.
Thank you. Any other question? Yeah. Councillor Nakbar?
Thank you. So this adds on to Councillor Jazzol's question somewhat. You put in one of your slides multifunctional in use, so I'm assuming that's some of the stuff you've listed already. I'm just wondering if any of those are sort of profit making, for use of a better word. Are you aiming to hold any activities within there that make profit? And with reference to what you mentioned just now about concerts, will that affect the wildlife and the biodiversity within the park? And if so, or if not, how do you propose to protect them from sort of the litter and the sound pollution that might come off these theatres? Thank you.
There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with commercial activities, and we have commercial activities in our parks and open spaces. So yes is the answer. 500 to 600 hectare regional park will cost money to maintain, to enhance and improve. One of the sort of starting ambitions for the park was to create a park that rivals Queen Elizabeth Park in East London, and if you're familiar with that, you will recognise the huge commercial opportunities that brings with it, sort of food and beverage and charging for car parking. So we certainly wouldn't rule out commercial activities. We went to Beckenham Park last year to explore that, and they've got a commercial centre, a cafe. There's one charging for car parking. There's business units within that site, and a heritage building as well. So in terms of the funding picture for the creation of a regional park, we're looking at every opportunity, from grant funding, philanthropy to looking at commercial opportunities as well. When I said concerts, I bit my lip because, as I say, they are quite emotive. We have a limited range of sites within Ealing Borough that can host concerts or even festivals. So Gunnersbury Park, Walpole Park are the main two. But we're quite interested, and as recognised in the Cultural Manifesto, again, there's a bit of an inequality of access to cultural activities as well. We would choose not to put that type of commercial activity into sites of high worth ecology and biodiversity. So we would take that on board, make an assessment, and do it where it's most appropriate.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Councillor Ditsa?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. You had some excellent questions from the panel, and I'm going to break that. I'm going to ask a silly question. You know, on slide 5, what are we doing? Climate action. You talk about rewilding and tree canopies. What does it actually mean for the general public? Does it mean not cutting the grass and not pruning the trees? If so, what criteria are we going to apply? And which open spaces are we going to target?
Probably as recently as 7 years ago, council used to cut every blade of every inch of grass in the borough to a municipal length. It's become recognised that that's an inappropriate way to improve biodiversity, create wildlife corridors, and effectively not just enhance but to protect what we have. So over that 7 years, we've designed a different approach to the way we cut grass in our parks, by creating a mixed economy where people have access to playing fields, sports pitches, areas to sit and connect and combine, but also around the fringes of all of our parks, around our trees to protect tree roots. We've let the grass grow longer. As you will see at Pear Tree Park, it was a golf course that was, the grass was cut daily. And within a few short months, leaving the grass to grow, you can recognise the almost instantaneous improvement in biodiversity and creating habitats for wildlife as well. So again, we take a mixed approach to our grass cutting regime, and that has changed quite dramatically. Highway verges, for example, provide great opportunities for creating, as I say, habitat corridors for insects and wildlife as well. Tree canopy, well, as I say, we have a really ambitious program to improve our canopy position, and you heard Nicole saying the very same about the GLA and the Mayor's ambition to increase tree canopy by 10%. We're planting 50,000 trees. We planted 28,000 trees over the last 2 years, and we're going to plant another 25,000 trees. We tend to plant trees in a number of styles. Some of that to create or build upon existing woodlands. So at Horsenden Hill, for example, we're extending our woodland. We plant a number of, we probably have the largest standard tree planting program in London in terms of street trees. And we then also plant a number of whips, which are small trees in parks and open spaces and local nature reserves and areas like Paraval Park, which will form in 10 to 15 years, so quite slow, but will ultimately increase the canopy cover. We still have a regime of annual inspections for trees. The trees are surveyed 1 year and then programmed for the works to happen in the second year. Budgets have got tighter, and where possible, we take a view where we don't believe trees need to be trimmed. We won't trim them as methodically as we used to. So that's because of reducing budgets for tree maintenance. But we do have a specification. We recognise highways, we recognise bus heights, etc. We are playing catch up still post COVID in terms of our tree maintenance program. We lost a year. Nobody was going out. So in terms of having the ability to trim trees during COVID, we lost a year. So over the preceding 3 years, we're now almost at a point where we've caught up with our program, our annual program. So for 3 years, there was a perception that the trees weren't being maintained as much as they used to be, but now we've pretty much caught up with that program.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions as well. Thank you. That was a very interesting presentation and upcoming events. That's it's going to be the regional park. My questions are more the regional park. I appreciate with some of your answers, Chris, you said that it's evolving. You picking up more events and what can be done as a regional. But is there a sort of an initiative? Are you doing consultation? Is there a list of events or tours that can be done for the members of the public? I mean, it's particularly during winter time, there's less interest, residents going into the park. So it has to be made more interesting and more appealing that the people to go into the park and find things to do that is relevant to them. In particular, I'm more interested in the health and well-being. You touched on the beginning of your presentation more about the difference between different towns and how it's quite important to have exercise and have mental health and health and well-being. There was a mention about five out of 7 towns will be connectable to the to the regional park, and I just wanted to know which ones are those. Are they being considered the areas where it's really needed to have more mobility, the members of the public? And my last question is there a sort of can we recommend a list of events or activities that can be held that you brainstorming at the moment that we can actually see, so we can add our ideas to it? Thank you.
Let's not forget that we are not creating a regional park from scratch. Regional park is in terms of the green spaces, some of them are not publicly accessible, but a lot of it is. Brent River Park exists, the 27 interlinked parks already exist. Some of those are leased out to sports clubs, to golf clubs, to community organisations who run a plethora of events and programmes and activities. So we're not starting from a clean sheet of paper. There is already a huge amount of activity that goes on in our parks. This is around recognition of bringing a number of sites together, bringing in sites that are not publicly accessible, to create something that satisfies the hierarchy of the GLA in terms of a regional park. Using that as a concept to increase access, look at funding opportunities to enhance what we've already got. So there's a lot going on already. You'll recognise on Saturday there's an event going on to celebrate an investment in part of the regional park in partnership with the Canal and Rivers Trust and the Peabody Trust as well. And that goes on all the time. Let's Go Southall again. Let's Go Southall is part of the regional park, and again through that funded programme we've been able to animate our parks, and there's 80 different activities going on every week in Southall in terms of people becoming more healthy and well-being. We're looking to expand that programme into Norfolk, Greenford and Perivale. So we're about to submit a funding bid to Sport England for additional funding to expand the principle of that into more towns. It does touch 5 out of 7 towns. It doesn't touch all of the 7 towns, and as I say, that isn't physically possible because of largely transport nodes, major roads, major industrial estates. So it's Ealing, West Ealing, Greenford, start at the top, Norfolk, Greenford, Southall, West Ealing, Hanwell. As we undertook, working with Kate and Pryor's whole range of engagement and consultation, online surveys in terms of starting to promote the concept of a regional park, and we use that as part of the sort of the argument to cabinet to adopt the forward direction for this. And the work that Pryor's has done hasn't been socialised or publicised yet. That's the next phase. So we're actually currently designing what our engagement and consultation looks like. We're talking to colleagues who are running the Your Voice, Your Town programme as well. And Kate and I actually came along to 4 of the sessions across Ealing when that was running earlier this year. When we opened Pear Tree Park, we had our Parks Foundation with their manning a stand in terms of seeking views and opportunities. Somebody's written to me around an opportunity to create a maze or a labyrinth in the park. So again, we're looking at all opportunities here, and then trying to look at ways of matching the funding to be able to deliver on some of those ambitions. As I say, there are a whole host of events and activities, but if the committee is able to think about something that they feel would have an impact upon their wards, that would be really interesting to hear.
Thank you. I'm sure my colleagues here will have some ideas, some recommendation. I certainly have one, which is Southall Park. Can we hold concerts there? That will be, because we have lots of events during winter, and it would be great to actually able to hold concerts like happens in Walpole. That's one of my recommendations. Thank you. I would recommend, based on Councillor Hirsch, what you said about timelines and budget, is there any information that can be provided just to make it a bit more clearer, the timelines of the remaining developments, and any budgets or any information that can be shared? That's one recommendation.
Can I just timelines definitely, budget's not at this point, so we haven't got document that sets out the budget for the creation and the management and the ongoing maintenance of the park at this point, but timeline in terms of actually recognising the work that priors have done and looking at a realistic phasing based upon an ambitious fundraising plan.
Yeah, that will be helpful. Thank you. Has anyone have any more? Councillor Nakbar?
Just one question for Nicole. Do you have any case study examples of a public-private partnership that has been successful, and can you give us some idea of what that looked like, please? Thank you.
We haven't actually done our own research, so I'm getting a bit of effect, at the GLA on this, beyond the kind of reports that I flagged. I'm not sure I can sort of, you know, in all honesty, kind of say, oh, this one worked and this one didn't. I mean, I've seen lots of case studies from across the country. There's always pros and cons, but so that the, I mean, if you're looking at ones in London, I mean, I think there are sort of variety of sort of examples. So I'm sure you've looked at the Wandle Valley as another sort of regional park project and the partnership that's been involved there. And I don't think that's been an easy path. I think in London there tends to be the sort of boroughs that lead. I think outside of London there's some interesting examples of the Bournemouth Parks Foundation I mentioned, and then there's the Neen Valley Regional Park Trust, which might be perhaps one that's more sort of more of a similar kind of project-based trust, where in this case there's lots of different landowners involved in it, so it's very much a sort of partnership set up as a charitable trust, and they've used a lot of planning gain funding to sort of feed into the development of that park. So that's the Neen Park Trust. I know there's an example in Newcastle of the City Council setting up an independent parks trust to manage their sort of key parks. That's more of a sort of borough council wide trust. Yeah, I mean, I think the best place to look is in some of those documents. So the Future Parks Accelerator has some examples. And also there's a report called Rethinking Parks by the organisation Nesta, which I think was published around, I'm going to guess now, I've got it in front of me, around 2020. And they looked at examples of different management models across the country. So I think there's some good case studies there as well. But I think there's also sort of, you know, there are so many different ways of doing it. So there's some where, I mean, presumably you're familiar with the Hounslow Council model, where they've got an arm's length organisation, what they're called now, but they've got an arm's length organisation to manage all their parks and green spaces. So they have some independence from the council to raise funds that perhaps the council couldn't do, and to sort of manage their finances sort of in a ring-fenced way. And I think there are pros and cons. So none of them are kind of, this is the way to do it, this is the best thing to do. I think there's always pros and cons to these different models. And it really is dependent on context and what you want to achieve and who owns the land, and yeah, who are the sort of key partners and stakeholders in the area who should be involved. So there's lots of different examples.
Thank you.
Can I come in on that?
Sure, yeah. Councillor Sidhu, we'll bring you in a minute. Chris needs to mention an item. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Really good coverage there. And I'm familiar with everything you mentioned. Part of the accelerator program, we applied to Nesta for rethinking. We got shortlisted, but we didn't receive the final recognition and funding that goes with that. And their view of our bid was that we expected too much of our residents.
Okay, interesting
response, because actually our residents do an enormous amount for us. And but we have taken some of the models and we've created our very own Parks Foundation in Ealing, which is still in its infancy, but we hope that it will rival Bournemouth. We have an arm's length local authority trading company, Greener Ealing Limited, that undertakes the grounds maintenance of our parks and open spaces across the borough. And we've created Gunnersbury Park Trust, which is now being up and running for six years, and is a really good example of that public-private partnership as well, because they the support that the two councils, Ealing and Hounslow, give them reduces year on year, with an expectancy that they will become self-sustaining through commercial income, lets, hires, parking income, events, festivals, tours, and reducing costs. So again, I would classify that as a success.
Interesting.
I've also been part of the analysis of the Newcastle Trust as well, with the Northumbria University, and they're currently doing an evaluation of what's going on at Newcastle, but also trying to understand what other local authorities that do have trusts like Ealing and Gunnersbury about what the future holds for such organisations and how they can work harder.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'm going to bring in Councillor Sidhu now.
Brilliant. Can you hear me all?
Yes.
I was going to say thank you, Chris and Nicole, for your great presentations. There's a lot of great food for thought here as well, and a lot I think we can do to help the residents. I just had a couple of queries in terms of like the current utilisation of our parks. Again, like one of the councillors had mentioned, after certain hours we see a reduction of people using the parks because they don't feel safe enough to use the parks during those periods. So is that then incorporated within your current plans when we start making and sort of linking the current parks to create the regional park? Will there be safer spaces? So is it going to be more well lit areas? Does it mean that children and like single mothers will be able to use the spaces a lot more? Which was one of my main issues now currently, especially within Southall. A lot of the parks aren't used after hours because it's a fear of safety at the moment. It links on to maybe also the second question, if we do have something of a regional park in terms of recommendations of how we could use it, e.g. like an outdoor theatre or like a movie setup. I know they do a pop-up in Osley Park in the summer where you get to watch movies live outdoor and it generates income as well. So maybe doing something similar to that in Southall Park to generate a bit of income and base it onto like old school like Indian Bollywood movies that I think would bring a lot of people in from that area, for example. And then just to build upon Councillor Dintz's point, in regards to the biodiversity areas that you had created in some of the parks and green spaces, I know a couple of the residents within Havelock were quite sad that one of like the main park/green spaces that they did have, certain areas were left uncut and just to increase biodiversity. And I know a lot of the children were disappointed because that's the only green space they do have to kick a ball around with a bit of grass. So is this then kind of allocated and thought of on a case-by-case basis, if there's like a slight thought process to it? Because I know for that area there's little to no links to other places where they would be able to do that besides Nord Green Park, which is a good about half an hour walk from the estate. So it was just, if anyone can come back to me on that, that would be great.
Sorry. We have 147 parks in Ealing. We only lock 17 at night. That's because there's only really 17 that we have interesting crime data and the ability to lock the parks, because a lot of our parks are open. We don't encourage people to go into our parks after dark, which is why we lock some of them. We don't provide lighting in nearly all of our parks. There's a policy not to put lighting. There's a few exceptions to that. So for us, it's not encouraging people to come into parks after dark. Everything we do around designing parks and open spaces, playgrounds and activities, safety is at the heart of that. So if you have any concerns about specific locations, I would welcome to hear about them, and we can respond to that proactively in terms of changing their perception. There's 8 criteria in the green flag assessment that Nicole mentioned, and we have 26 green flag parks, and a number of those are in Southall, and they recognise safety, becoming welcoming, and we've had significant investment in our parks over the last 10 to 15 years as well. Again, using the principle of safety at the core of that to improve the perception of them, to make them more welcoming. New signage, new advice, new gates, new fencing, new playgrounds. There's one park in Acton we've experimented in terms of actually lighting the playground after dark as well, to extend play opportunities for families as well. And that's been mildly successful, but probably not as successful to warrant the level of investment that was required. And as a father myself, I found that I was having to leave a playground at 3 o'clock in November, and that was the end of the day's opportunity. And actually the lights in Acton Green Common stay on till 6. So trying to look at ways of extending access into parks in a safe way. We have a parks patrol service that is intelligence led, that goes around our parks every day, and they operate usually between the hours of 2 p.m. and 12 midnight, and later if required, if the intelligence suggests so. But yeah, please let me know if there's any specific areas where you've got heightened concerns around the safety. There's also a program in the council in terms of respecting and improving safety for women around our spaces, our footpaths, our alleyways, etc. as well. So again, we've been feeding into that in terms of how the parks and open spaces, how the management of trees and shrubs and hedges can be improved in order to improve the perspective of safety. Very much welcome an opportunity to increase access to events and festivals in Southall. We often think about how we can land a big Bollywood film festival in Southall. So we keep exploring that. In one of the focused areas, we've identified an area for two areas actually, for potential new amphitheatres or cultural spaces, and one of those is in Southall. And Havelock, I don't believe the intention was to take away all of the access to manage green space for children's activities like football or kicking a ball or running around. So again, if there's an area in Havelock that now means they haven't got access to that space, let me know. That space is not managed by me, but that's managed by council estate services as well. So in liaison with them, we can change what was hopefully an unintentional consequence of letting the grass grow there. It doesn't feel appropriate to me if there is a poor access to usable green space. Sometimes people come first, and it sounds like Havelock Estate is one of those. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes all our questions. Next item is the panel operation in 2024-2025. Has the members reviewed the schedule? Do you have any recommendation or additional items that we may need to consider? Do you have any suggestion, any organizational stakeholders that we can include in circulation? No? Okay. Right. The panel work program is in Appendix 1 with the minutes. It was in the agenda items. Please do feel free to come back to me at a later date if you wish to, if there's any issues. And that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much for all our presenters. Yeah, next meeting is 14th of November, 7 o'clock. We'll see you all there. Have a good evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.